Hey everybody, Tobin here. Do you find yourself putting in a lot of NSLog or print statements in your code while debugging a problem with your application? Or do you find yourself constantly making tweaks, recompiling and relaunching your application to see the results of those tweaks? If so, then this quick tutorial is for you. I'm going to share with you a few debugging tips using breakpoints in Xcode to help you save time and avoid cluttering your code in these situations. But first, I'm Tobin, and welcome to my channel where we explore how apps are made through product reviews, Q&As, and tutorials like this one. If you're new here, consider joining the community by subscribing to this channel. On the surface, a basic breakpoint in Xcode is pretty straightforward. We set a breakpoint on a line of code, we execute the code. When the runtime environment reaches that line where the breakpoint is set, the execution is paused. Once paused, we get to evaluate the state of the runtime by using the debugger or to step through code to follow the logic. It's a powerful start, but there's a lot more opportunity to use breakpoints to be more efficient debugging code. So if you're anything like me, I'm pretty sure you put a lot of NSLog or print statements in your code to debug a problem. Now, this tends to clutter the code and sometimes makes it a little difficult to follow. And if you're not disciplined, again, like me, then you're probably going to leave a lot of these statements in when you ship your code, and that's no good. Also, not to mention, every time you add an NSLog statement to print out a value, you're probably recompiling your code, relaunching your application, and getting the application to a state again where you can test it. In the long run, this ends up wasting a lot of time. Often editing the code would be one of two things. Either putting in an NSLog or print statement, or tweaking some values to adjust some UI element. Instead, I started using breakpoints to replace NSLog and print statements in my code, as well as modify data in real time while I was running my application. All right, so let's jump into Xcode and I'll show you these tips. Okay, before we get started, you could grab the source code to this project from my GitHub account. There's a repository called Xcode Breakpoints. I'll link to it below in the video description. So this is a very simple project. It includes a single view controller, and in that view controller is a subview that contains a UI label and a UI button. Whenever the user taps on the UI button, a random number will be printed to the UI label. So the view controller source code is pretty simple, but let's take a quick look. As mentioned, I have a UI label and it's wired up here, as well as an IB action for the tap event for the button that will generate the next random number and print it to the label. The random number function being used by the next number action simply generates a unsigned 32-bit integer using arg4random, prints out the value to the console, and then returns the value. Now we're going to get rid of this print statement. Simply just delete that line of code, and we're going to replace it with a breakpoint. So we're going to set a breakpoint by tapping here, and then we're going to control and click to bring up the dialog, and then we're going to select Edit Breakpoint. So from here, this is some stuff we can set up, conditionals. We can have it ignore the breakpoint before a certain number of times executing that. We can add an action, and then we have an option to automatically continue after evaluating actions. So first, we're going to add an action, and we're going to have a log message. So here, I'm just going to type in dash, 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 whoops, dash, 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 and then I'm going to print the expression of random number here. So if you can see here, what I'm using is this format to print the expression. You can also add a %B to display the breakpoint name that's being executed, as well as %H to show the hit count of how many times this breakpoint's been executed. So we're going to select this option, automatically continue after evaluating actions. Now what's going to happen there is when we have this clicked and checked, when the code reaches this breakpoint, the debugger is just going to continue going and not pause. And what it's going to do is execute our action for logging a message, which is going to log our random number. So let's see this in action. Okay, so now we're running the code in the simulator. I'm going to tap on next number, and we should see in the console output here the random value for random number. There we go. As you can see, after we tapped on next number, we have the output from our breakpoint displayed here in the debugging console. Now, I don't know if you notice this or not, but the value that's being output to the label looks pretty different. So let's not forget, we use an unsigned 32-bit integer to store the random number that's being displayed in the label. And I've noticed an issue here where I am formatting the string of the random value to an integer. Now that's not right, but I don't want to stop the code and re-execute this to see if I can fix it. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to set another breakpoint here. I'm going to edit the breakpoint. Okay. And now I'm going to add an action. This time I'm going to change the action from a log message to a debugger command. And in this case, I am going to say, let's just say, I'm going to execute the expression of self.number.text equals string format %u random int, and I am also going to make sure I click this option for automatically continue after evaluating actions. So without recompiling the code, let's see what happens now. So if I tap on this, we should be still printing out the value for the random number, as well as changing the value of the number label dynamically. There we go. So here we go. Let's try this again. Oh, but check that out. I still have this problem here where I have a negative value being displayed here, and then a non-negative number being displayed down here. So what's ending up happening here is that the breakpoint is being executed before this line of code is being executed. So instead, let's take this action, let's take this breakpoint and actually move it down to the next line. I've now switched the breakpoint from line 49 and moved it to line 50. So let's double tap on the breakpoint just to make sure it's still there and everything is still here. Okay, let's try it one more time. So here we go. Let's do next number. Boom, there we go. Again, boom, there we go. So now that looks right. Now I'm just going to make this change here. It's not recompiled, but I'm going to make sure that I do this, and then on the next time we execute the code, the problem is corrected. Now let's also do something else here. Let's change the color of the text to red. Okay, so the UI label, we're going to change the UI label to be red when the person taps on the button. So we're going to use the same breakpoint that I did before. I'm going to edit the breakpoint. And here I can add an additional action by clicking on this button, this plus button here. Okay, so here we're going to do this here. We're going to turn the number label red. So here we're going to do XPR, which is short for expression again. I'm going to do self number label dot color or text color. There we go. And then we're going to do UI color dot red. Okay, and we're going to still continue. So right now what's going to happen is going to, when it reaches our breakpoint, it's going to run this expression first by fixing the format of the string, and then run this one, which will change the color of the text. So let's try it out. When I hit this button, we will see the color of the number turn red. There we go. Let's also change this button. Let's change the background color of this button. So let's just edit the breakpoint, and let's add another one. I'm going to do expr self dot, oh, you know what? I'm going to change this. I'm going to say sender. Now that's going to be interesting. Background color. So I don't know if this is going to work, but let's see what happens here. So hit this. Nope. So here we see this error message here. Ambiguous use of background color. Okay, so let's change this here. Edit breakpoint again. And we're going to say sender. But this time we're going to cast sender as UI button. Okay, so we're going to do sender as a UI button, and then set, or we're going to say background color equals UI color dot blue. Okay, let's tap this and see what happens. There we go. So let's do one more thing. So we're printing out this number. It's pretty nice and long, but let's actually change this to a hexadecimal value. So I think it is a %x, so let's verify that. And I'm going to do that by putting an X here. changing this action again. Let's change this. Let's run this code, and the next thing will be printed out as hexadecimal. There we go. All right, so there you have it. Those are just a few tips to how you can step up your debugging game using breakpoints and Xcode. And if you enjoyed this, hit the like button below. If you want to hear more, subscribe to this channel. And if you have any comments or questions, leave them below and I'll get back to you. All right, thanks everyone. Peace.